Brilliant. So I'm Susan Galloway. I'm faculty head at Drumchapel. I've been here for a few years now, but one of the things that we've had to work quite a lot on was really raising attainment of pupils and also engaging pupils who had a lot of barriers to literacy, but generally had quite a negative mindset and would opt out of tasks, particularly tasks if they had the word assessment involved in them. Now, I'm no expert in this, but I'm just going to talk about how we've used forms. If I've got time, I'll do a wee bit in class notebook as well, but I'll see how that goes. We've had particular success in raising attainment in our UAE skills at senior phase using forms particularly. I'm going to start off with talking about how we use it in the BGE, and then I'll move on to senior phase. Now, I'm going to move between the PowerPoint and a sort of live demo just because I realised when I was practising that pupil names kept appearing on some of the actual forms that I use. So I've kind of mocked up alternatives just so that I can use that as a demo. Now, we are fortunate enough to, for anyone who is not in Glasgow, we are fortunate enough to just have had our huge delivery of iPads since August. We've given them out from S2 to S6. We still don't have enough yet to give to S1. But how we'd used forms up until now had very much been pupils being able to access forms through their phones. We had some PCs in the library, and we had a bank of 20 iPad minis and a Wi-Fi hub that we would just sort of book them out for different classes. How are we using it then in the BGE? It was intended to kind of support pupils with reading and particularly close reading skills. I had a digital class for S3 and S4 a couple of years ago, and that particular class all had significant barriers to learning, generally benefited from using assistive technologies, but had up until that point also shown a real reluctance to engage in literacy.
There we go. That's it.
You know?
Yes, that's
right.
it. Thanks.
Sorry about that. There's only 4 slides anyway, and it was mainly just prompters for me. But Helen, if you don't mind flagging up if it switches off again.
No worries.
So the idea was to normalise assessment opportunities for pupils and to an extent use sort of gamification and make close reading as fun as we could, hopefully reducing anxiety and that sort of fear of failure. The other aspect of this was also introducing the language of challenge. Now, I didn't come up with this idea, I entirely stole it off of Pinterest, but the concept of the chili challenge, I'm not sure if any of you have used this sort of thing, but we use the chili challenge model across all aspects of our faculty to stop talking with pupils about differentiation in a negative way, but instead the idea is that all pupils experience challenge, that they all opt into challenge at whatever level that they feel able to. The majority of pupils we target as hot within a class, but we will also have spicy for maybe pupils that need a bit more of a simplified version, a bit differentiated in that sense, but we'll also have an extra hot version of tasks so that those who need additional challenge at the top end have got it. We found it's been really useful in getting pupils to see the benefits in challenging themselves. We use it, for writing. We might have different success criteria that are challenge related, or in a critical essay, it might be about having a different essay plan or the number of passages that we've used. So, I'm going to take you into an example of one of my forms. Now, you should be able to see forms for me.
Yeah, we can.
What that looks like. Brilliant. So, For anyone that's not used forms, forms are really straightforward. You just access them via what I think of as the wee waffle. If you're in your OneDrive and so on, the wee waffle at the top hand corner, you can obviously from there get into forms. Now, creating a form is extremely self-explanatory, and as George was saying, there's obviously resources already in place to support that. Where we tend to use it with BGE is to use the quiz function rather than the form function. Now, if I take you into a spicy challenge has got a wee space that I've created for the pupil's name. I have got different questions. Now, in my version, there's a wee tick next to the word road. That's because when you create a quiz, it allows a self-marking option. It's great for multiple choice challenges and really great for quick things. So this is a wee spicy challenge. It's not very long. You know, if I chose to create a new question, just clicking the plus sign, and in this case, it's a multiple choice question that I would probably want to create. It allows me to then type the question in. I can add a picture if I wanted to. I can add the options of my answers. If I decided I needed additional options, I can just do so. And it also gives me the option to put in the answer there and how many points. Now, in most cases, these quizzes are just a single answer, but if I did want them to be able to do multiple answers, I could do that. Now, I generally make them also required, and that stops them being able to submit the quiz unless they finished every question in it. Themes, quite often I customize a theme and add my own, but say if I just wanted to create, a straightforward theme, I can do that from there. For sharing it with the pupils. Now, when I use this as from a kind of faculty head point of view, I use it for really like evaluations and things like that. So I quite often would send a link that we would just put out on our Teams, or if I'm sending a link out to parents, I might turn it into a tiny URL and we would send it out in a text message. But for pupils, generally, I would just use it as a QR code, and I would create this and I would just use the snip function or to screenshot it and then add it into my PowerPoint. Going back a bit, my extra hot challenge has additional level of challenge, and in this case, this example, I've actually copy and pasted a bit of text there. Now, this was designed to mimic the kind of process that pupils would get in the SNSAs. It was something that we found when the SNSAs came out, that a lot of our pupils really struggled with the small amount of text and then answering the questions and getting through that at a reasonable pace. So we introduced these activities just to make it a bit more familiar. So when we did get to the SNSAs, that meant that pupils were a wee bit more comfortable with it. And again, you can see there's just questions there. Now, normally, if this was filled in, if I went to responses, you would obviously be able to see how many people had responded, what the average score was, and I could open the answers in Excel, which is just under the active word, and that would show me all the pupils' results. Now, I've got exemplars of ones that have been done by pupils back in my PowerPoint, which I'm just going to go back to. Let's just check again that you can actually see it. So what I've got on the screen at the moment is just an example of one that my class had filled in. So, at the top I've got 11 responses. It lets me see, obviously, for something that's as straightforward as this, the pie charts aren't really necessary, but it does give me the numbers for how many pupils did well in it, how many responded to it, and so on. Here is just, again, the other information I got. So the average score was 4.4 out of 5. So that's obviously a generally quite positive result. And down the bottom, I've got what I've copied from the spreadsheet in terms of the pupils' answers. Now, where that's just beneficial, it's just, you know, at this BGE level, being able to have a quick glance at how they did, and actually if a pupil has got answers wrong, what they were putting in their answers instead. More importantly, I use the timings for how long it's taken them to complete the quizzes, because that also usually gives me an indication if they've completed it extremely quickly that I haven't made things challenging enough and I need to adapt. If all pupils are getting all answers correct, obviously that's brilliant for their self-esteem, but it probably also suggests that I've not got enough challenge in each of the levels. One of the things that I kind of discovered about it was that the pupils themselves started trying in the class the next level of challenge. So pupils who we would identify as spicy would finish the spicy one and then want to have a go at the hot or want to have a go at the extra hot. And that changed the ethos of that particular class. And that's generally the approach that we've found across the department, is that more pupils are willing to try challenge and are sort of engaging with it. They really love the instant feedback as well that they get from it, and I find it reduces workload. What we have now got is a bit of a bank of these, so certain staff will take responsibility for creating certain types of quizzes, and then we just share them around with each other, and you know, it's a good wee 5-minute challenge to do at least once a week, maybe a bit more. In terms of senior phase, we use it in a different way. So in senior phase, I would use the form aspect, not the quiz aspect. That's because there's generally a different outcome to how I want to use it to assess, although you could obviously make them interchangeable. I've been using forms quite a lot over the last few years for our UAE. I found that pupils struggled, particularly in my school, with peer marking and being able to identify what a quality answer was. And I experimented with different things. You know, I had a visualizer that I would use to put over pupil work. I would type up pupil examples, although that could obviously be quite time intensive. But actually we found this method has been the one that has been most impactful and the most beneficial. Within most of our classes, we tend to have quite a variety of ability, even at senior phase. Pupils quite often lack confidence or reluctant to share answers, especially around our UAE. What we would use, so I'm just going back into my forms. If I go to National 5 RUE 2016, so that's the one for any of you that are familiar with it, the Frozen paper, the one about the singer of the song at the Super Bowl. Again, I'm assuming everyone can now see inside my form. There
We can.
Yep. So all I've literally done here is created a form. I have left a wee space for the name, but other than that, I copy and pasted. So if I'm doing it on an iPad or even on a PC, it's so straightforward. Just going to the SQA site, I am opening up that past paper and I'm literally copying and pasting each question in there. Now in this case, I am creating text answers. Add new, I'm creating text. I just would copy and paste my question in. In terms of my answer, I want the approach that they can have a long answer. Now in some cases it might be short, but I would always select long answer, and I would also always select required. So even if they don't know, they've had to at least put something down rather than the indication that they might have just ignored it. Now the reason I don't use quiz for this is that the self-mark function just isn't good enough. It can't pick up on the number of answers that potentially a pupil might come up with for RUEE. So it's always easier if you're just using it for a multiple choice option. When I go back to my PowerPoint, which hopefully you will be able to see, although I think there might be again a delay on it. Helen, can you now see
Yeah,
my...
we've got it. We've
Amazing.
got it. Thank you.
Right, so what I've got on the left-hand side, I realise the font's quite small, is a screenshot from one of my National 5 classes who did that specific close reading. Now, where it's beneficial is I can look at column H, which is question 3, and I can see every pupil in the class's responses all the way down. How we use this is that I would usually share this with the class. Now I can share it on Teams quite easily, but in the past I would have had it on the board. I would probably put it in my the group for the class so that pupils who had access to data on their phones and wanted to use it would get access to it. What it meant was I wasn't having to take the time to find a pupil who I could use their answer for. I also wasn't having to type them up. All pupils can see what all the answers are. We would then use the marking scheme in particular to question, and I would get them to run through it and actually just grade what mark would they give each question. Because they weren't seeing the names of everyone, they generally were, everyone was quite confident then about sharing their answers because no one knew what answer would belong to what person. I usually would give a paper copy of the text just because they seem to prefer still having the paper copy, but obviously you could work without it. I felt like we kind of spent a lot more time getting into the quality of answers, really getting into a question. And also it allowed me to target what I was seeing. So if I identified that lots of pupils hadn't really given any real response to a question, that was obviously one then I targeted additional time to kind of going over in teaching. It did take a while for them to get used to this. It wasn't the very first time I did it, it took a lot longer. But over time, they got really fast at it. And pupil feedback, again, across our faculty is that they prefer doing close reading this way and that they do see that it does help them.